This isn't happening. Those were the only words that would come out of the mouth of the detective. Maria stared down at the note that was firmly grasped in her paw as she read the note over and over and over again. Each time she did this, more and more questions flooded her head like lava in a volcano. Where was Pablo? Who the hell wrote that note? How in the ever-living fuck did somebody manage to open up that window without breaking in? And more importantly, how would have this person been able to climb up to the second floor of the house, open a locked window, and take Pablo without emitting even a single sound? These questions caused the detective to drift off for a moment's time, trying to analyze the situation as best as she could. However, the sound of police sirens and screeching tires snapped her out of her trance. Not wanting to take any chances, Maria quickly put on a pair of latex gloves that she had conveniently had in her back pocket, and began searching the area for any kind of evidence as to who had taken Pablo, although she had a feeling she knew who it was. She searched all over the room, the dresser, the closet, the nightstand, even the window itself, underneath the bed, but nothing could be found. Carefully, she lifted up the crumpled up blanket on the bed, only to find something sticking out of the far side of the bed that was underneath the bed sheets. Lifting the blanket up a bit more, to get a better look, she was greeted with the sight of a small syringe tucked carefully into the bed sheets, almost completely out of view. "You've got to be kidding me," the detective said as she reached over and grabbed the syringe from the bottom of the object. Holding the needle in her gloved paw, she called out for Pablo's mother. "Elizabeth!" Detective Maria yelled out. The sound of rushing footsteps coming up from the stairs and down the hall practically echoed throughout the house, with such speed that it would have made even a cheetah jealous. Barely a fraction of a second later, Pablo's mother burst into the room, her face still matted with tears. "Did you find my baby?" Pablo's mother asked with a heavy tone of sadness and excitement mashed together. Maria looked back at Elizabeth with a saddened look on her face, as she turned around slowly to reveal the small needle that was still in her paw. Pablo's mother looked at the needle in shock before starting to cry again. "Oh my gosh!" Elizabeth cried out. She placed her flippers over her eyes and slowly wept. "Elizabeth?" Maria asked softly. "Yes?" Elizabeth said through her tears. "I need you to go and get me a—" The detective was quickly interrupted by the sound of a loud banging coming from the front door. Elizabeth jumped and looked frightened for a moment, but Maria quickly consoled her. "It's just the police, Elizabeth. Go in and let them in. They're here to help with the case," Maria said. Elizabeth nodded, before walking out of the door and quickly going downstairs to answer it. Upon getting to said door, Elizabeth took a quick look out of the peephole and, surprise, surprise, there were the cops. Unlatching and unlocking the door, the officers quickly walked into the young mother's home, shining their lights at every crevice of the house. Through the onslaught of various police officers, detectives, and the like, one finely dressed wolf detective made his way slowly towards the young penguin's mother and flashed him his badge. "Miss Elizabeth," Captain Ezekiel said as he took off his hat and placed it on a conveniently placed hat rack. "Yes, officer?" Elizabeth asked, still sniffling. "I got a call from Detective Maria saying that you had called her up because you couldn't find your son, am I correct?" Ezekiel asked. "Yes, sir. That was me calling. Please, you have to find my baby. You have to find him, please. Please, please find him," Maria said, almost going into a panic attack in the process. "May I ask you, do you know where Detective Maria is at as of now? I have the results from the rape kit," Ezekiel said. Elizabeth cringed and shuddered at the very mention of the rape kit that was done on her son. Not really being able to say much of anything due to her panicked state, she just pointed her flipper upwards towards the stairs. "First door on the right." "Thank you, Miss Elizabeth. Now, once we've managed to get everything that we need here, we're going to need to ask you a few questions." "Anything, officer," Elizabeth said, wiping away the last of her tears and going to sit down on one of the couches. With that all said and done, Ezekiel slowly walked up the stairs with a few other detectives to go and start collecting any kind of fingerprints or DNA that might have been left at the scene of the crime. Upon arriving at Pablo's room, the captain immediately took note of the syringe still in Maria's paw. Ezekiel immediately motioned for one of his detectives near him to collect the syringe and bag it up, which they did with no hesitation whatsoever. Once that was done, Ezekiel motioned for Maria to meet him outside into the hall, which she obeyed. Upon entering the hall, Ezekiel closed the door to the room and looked at Maria intently. "Chief, look, I have no idea how any of this happened, but..." Maria was silenced by Ezekiel placing a paw on her shoulder. "Don't blame yourself, Maria. I'm the idiot who screwed all this up for everyone," Ezekiel said, lowering his head in shame. I should have just had Pablo stay at the station. Or at least had a few cops patrolling the area, but I didn't. I don't fucking know why, but I didn't." Ezekiel's face soon dropped to the saddest frown that he had ever made in his entire life. "I've dealt with many cases involving young children. Child molesters, murderers, sadists, every kind of fucked up person in the book. I've dealt with them. But out of all the children, why is it that every time I reread all the shit Pablo had to go through in the files, why does it get to me? Why does it hurt me so much? I don't understand it, you know." Maria looked at Ezekiel's face and saw something that made her jaw nearly drop to the floor. Tears. Real, genuine tears forming around the chief's eyes. In all the years that Maria had worked on the team, she had never once saw Ezekiel cry for any case. In fact, he would oftentimes show no emotion for any of the newer cases, no matter how bloody, nor how insane or disgusting they were. This was not to say that he was a heartless person in general. He had seen so much working in the police force that anything really regarding anything remotely tragic or fucked up in one way or another honestly had desensitized him to its full force. However, to see this kind of emotion on his face was one that almost frightened her. Ezekiel wiped his eyes and then handed a large manila envelope and placed it into Maria's paw. "Open it up," Ezekiel demanded. She obediently opened the file, only to show the test results for the rape kit that was done on Pablo a day or so back. On the first page of the results, it showed a small picture in the right corner of the paper with the same pig man that Pablo had described during the interview. Pig's face was as ugly, if not even more revolting than what Pablo had described. "That detective is Alex J. Byrne. He's 45, a convicted pedophile and a registered sex offender in all 50 states. He was arrested back in '95 after he was caught having a heavy stash of child pornography on his laptop. He served only a few months in prison due to a corrupt judge who also had ties with multiple pedophile rights activist groups and rings. He was also registered in the sex offender registry in '01 after being caught sexually molesting a young 10-year-old boy. For some reason, though, he served no prison time. This was really all we had on this guy, because as of now, he's pretty much off the grid. We have no clue on how to track this guy. Something else I need to ask you as well. Did Pablo ever get tested?" Chief Ezekiel asked. "Yes, sir. He was tested clean after multiple examinations." "Why do you ask?" Maria asked him. "Because after testing the semen sample from the rape kit, it was found out that Alex himself had multiple STDs and even AIDS." "Oh my gosh," Maria muttered in disgust. "I know. It's honestly a medical miracle that Pablo didn't contract any of these STDs that this fat fuck had put into him. Now, I don't believe in any kind of god of any sort, but after reading the test results from the kit, I'm seriously questioning my beliefs now. There's no possible way that Pablo couldn't have gotten one of those diseases after being raped numerous times by that fat fuck. Honestly, It's still something I don't even understand, but if there is a God, then he's definitely watching over him, Ezekiel said. Chief Ezekiel took in a deep breath before regaining his professional tone of voice. Question, Detective. Where exactly did Pablo and his friends go for their camping trip? The forest across the street from here. Why? Maria asked. I'll call it the police station, the FBI, and many armed men and women I can get. You and I are going to storm the living fuck out of that woods until we get to that cabin. I hope you've already eaten and gotten some rest, Detective, because we're not resting for even a minute until that kid is brought back home safe and sound to his mother. Do you understand that? Chief Ezekiel said. Yes, Captain, Maria said. Good. Now rile everyone up and split them up into groups of 5. Have them go through every nook and cranny of this forest. I'll call up the other officers and have them go on different paths of the forested area. Not only that, I'll even hire up a few chopper people to come up and scan the area at all times as well. Yes, sir, Maria responded before saluting him and going downstairs to get everyone ready for the search party. Darkness. That was all Pablo could make out as he slowly stirred from his unconscious state. Almost instantly, he could feel the restraints cuffed on his flippers as well as the ball gag shoved deep into his mouth. However, compared to last time, he could easily move his flippers around, and the seat that he was sitting in was a lot softer, although very sticky and slightly damp. He started to calm down a little bit. Maybe he had just sleptwalked or something like that, and was now sitting down on his soft plush chair that his mother had gotten for him for his 8th birthday. But if that was the case, then why did he have thick metal cuffs on his flippers? And why did he have a gag in his mouth? Wanting to get some answers, he quickly lifted the black bag off of his head, and instantly regretted that decision. There, right in front of him, was the hate-filled, snarling pigman that had tormented him and his friends many days back. His face as ugly as ever. He froze as he glanced upon the towering pigman, who did nothing but give off an angry yet disappointed look at the small blue penguin. Pablo immediately started to panic. No, 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 no. Pablo mentally screamed. His reaction was met with a firm, violent slap to the face by the pigman. Pablo fell sideways on the large leather seat cushion, softening the blow just a little bit. Pablo got back up and sat himself back upright as he shook from fear. A few of his bandaged cuts and wounds on his head opened back up, causing small streams of blood to pour down the bandage and his face. The pigman grabbed Pablo's face with his greasy, ungloved, and sore-ridden fingered hooves and placed it near to his own face. The pigman breathed heavily onto Pablo, which caused Pablo to start gagging from the smell of the pig's shit-scented breath. The pigman reached over to where the ball gag had been tied in the back of Pablo's head and unlatched it. I'm very disappointed in you, Pablo, the pigman spat. Pablo only whimpered as the man scrunched up his face even harder than before. You told on me, didn't you? The pigman asked with the fullest ounce of hate. Pablo said nothing, but began sobbing softly to himself. This didn't seem to satisfy the pigman, so he just pulled out his hunting knife and pressed the edge of the blade onto Pablo's neck, which made the young penguin stop crying instantly. I'm gonna ask you again, you little faggot. You told on me, didn't you? The pigman said as he pressed the blade a little deeper into Pablo's soft neck, almost cutting it. Yes, Pablo said softly, tears continuing to flow down his face at a rapid pace. At least you're being honest with me, that is, the pigman said as he withdrew the knife from Pablo's neck and placed it back into its holster. Gotta say, Pablo, you made me very upset when you decided to leave like that without saying goodbye. I would have ran after you, but I was in the process of fucking your little faggot boyfriend. so I just decided to wait a little while longer, the pigman said, getting closer to Pablo. Why? Why? Pablo muttered under his breath. What was that? The pigman said, with a sly smile on his face. Why? Pablo screamed with a mixture of anger and fear, tears flowing down his face at a rapid rate. The pigman smiled and started laughing hysterically. He kept on laughing, laughing, and laughing some more. Why am I doing this? The pigman said in between laughs. You asked the most cliche thing ever. Why? Why? Why are you doing this to me? The pigman said mockingly. The pigman stomped over towards Pablo and proceeded to grab Pablo by the neck and pull him right close to his face. Let me tell you something, Pablo. I know more about you and your little friends than you think. In fact, I've been secretly filming all of you for quite some time now. A few years to be exact. And I'm not just talking about your little adventures either. The pigman gave a wild, evil smile as he let go of Pablo's face and walked over towards a drawer and pulled out a large camcorder of some sort, followed by a set of wires with tiny cameras attached to it. Pablo's eyes widened with fear. Had this sick fuck actually been recording all of them for years on end? His question was soon answered when the pigman made his way towards a small TV in the far right corner of the cabin area, specifically the kitchen, and plugged the camcorder into the small flat-screen television. He then turned it on, and there, right in front of the small penguin, was footage of various lengths playing on the television of him and his friends. 3 years of footage on this camera, the pigman said with a slight cackle. All of your adventures, all of your sleepovers, all of your secrets. The pigman cackled evilly as he used a remote to switch to another scene on the TV. Pablo nearly had a heart attack as the scene came up to show different scenes of each of the Backyardigans showering or taking a bath. There were more scenes of very personal moments that came up, which made Pablo blush with both embarrassment and shame. And then the entire thing cut to him and his friends, all having their adventures in their backyard. After a few moments of that, the TV cut to black. The pigman smirked at the now traumatized penguin and giggled like a little schoolgirl before grabbing the camcorder and putting it back into the drawer. Pablo, at this point, was just begging for all of this to end right here and right now. He just wanted to wake up in his bed and run into his mother's warm embrace. He wanted to go outside in his backyard and see all of his friends waiting for him outside to play. He wanted nothing else more than to all this just to be one bad dream. Tears started to flow down the young penguin's face again, as he knew that this was no dream, but instead reality. He was just begging for the pigman to just end his life already so that he could be with his friends again in heaven. No more pain, no more sadness, no more rapes, no more anything bad. He and his friends could have as many adventures as they wanted for all eternity in heaven. However, this wasn't the case at this point, as the pigman wanted to do nothing more than prolong the suffering of the small penguin in front of him, before brutally slaughtering him in the process. Just as Pablo had finally given up, his stomach growled, which caught the attention of the pigman. Hungry, I see? The pigman said, with a sadistic smile painted on his face. Pablo only nodded his head before beginning to cry once more. The pigman smirked and then walked over towards the old dilapidated fridge and opened it up and pulled out a large metal cookie sheet covered with the blue towel. Upon closing the door, the pigman made his way into the living room area where Pablo was sitting at and placed the tray right next to the still sobbing penguin. How about a little snack? The pigman said before yanking off the blue towel. Pablo closed his eyes tight and dared not even look at what was presented to him. However, his curiosity got the better of him and he took a quick peek. What he saw confused him. On the tray, where he expected to see various organs and severed limbs of various children, or in this case his friends, he saw nothing else but a very large pile of jerky on the tray, some thick, others relatively thin. Pablo blinked a few times. Obviously he wasn't planning on eating any of it. He really didn't trust this guy. I mean, honestly, who knows what was in that jerky? The pigman looked down at his victim and then scratched his massive, hairy, and flabby chin. You know what? I don't think you can actually eat all of that by yourself. Hang on 1 second. The pigman then walked off into the kitchen, back into the bedroom area, and closed the door. Everything was quiet for a moment, before the sound of chains rustling could be heard inside of the bedroom. Almost as soon as the pigman had entered the room, he had already exited out of it, carrying in his fat, gloved hooves a large chain. And connected to that chain was Austin. Oh my God! Austin? Pablo yelled out. He couldn't believe his eyes. Austin was still alive. Detective Maria rushed through the thick forested area with 3 cops by her side, guns drawn and night vision goggles employed. After a few minutes of searching throughout the area, her walkie-talkie buzzed, signaling that someone was trying to contact her. She quickly answered the call and placed the device towards her ear. Anything yet? Maria asked.
As of now, negative, Detective. Nothing from the south side of the forest or anything from the northeast side either.
Has the chopper spotted anything suspicious? Maria asked once more.
No, at least not. Hang on a second. I'm getting a call from them.
A few minutes of silence passed before the chief responded again.
The chopper crew spotted a small cabin-like structure about a mile or so northwest, away from where you're all at.
Does the chopper crew have any safe place to land? Maria asked once more.
Unfortunately, no. We can't even deplete any of our men on that spot either. It's too thick, and honestly, it could cause a lot more problems than anything else.
Maria huffed. She didn't know for a fact if Pablo was still alive at this point. Normally, when a kidnapper gets his or her victim a second time, the person in question who's normally kidnapping usually doesn't survive. She prayed to God that Pablo would be alright, or at least still alive. She couldn't even fathom how much torture the little kid must have been going through now, especially when it's the same bastard that's doing the deed. She swallowed a bit of vomit that had escaped from her stomach at the thought of Pablo being dead. Have the chopper team give us some coordinates to the area where the cabin's at. We'll go by foot if we have to, Maria said firmly.
Yes, Officer Maria. 10-4.
And with that, the call hung up. Alright, you guys, no more breaks, Maria said to the other 3 officers with her. We've got to get a move on now. The other officers nodded, and then got up from where they were sitting at. A few minutes into running through the forest, Maria got a text from her phone. She pulled it out and saw that it was the text from Chief Ezekiel of the cabin's coordinates. She looked at her phone, and then followed the path that led straight to the area, at least from what the map said. I'm coming, Pablo. I promise by the end of this, you'll be safe and sound. That bastard's not going to hurt you anymore. I promise you. I will find you, Pablo. Austin's entire body was riddled with cuts and bruises. Some cuts were deep, while others were just slight scratches. Austin's shirt was torn in some places and stained with various substances and fluids that discolored various parts of the shirt. Austin's jeans were, although not as bad, were torn in some places and stained with the same fluids and looked very damp. His hands were shackled together with a long pair of handcuffs attached to chains. Also, upon his neck was a metal collar connected to the same chain. Austin was being dragged along like a small puppy by the perverted fat fuck. Upon getting to the table where Pablo was sitting at, the pigman lifted Austin up from the ground by the usage of the chains and placed him in another seat next to Pablo. "Now," the pigman said, "how about we have a snack?" Austin and Pablo nodded fearfully. "Good." The pigman grabbed the tray and brought it back into the kitchen area and placed the dehydrated meats on 2 separate plates. All the while he started to sing, "We've got the whole wide world in our yard to explore." Pablo nearly threw up in his mouth as the pig began singing their little theme song. Austin, however, just looked empty and soulless as he joined in on the singing as well. "Now it's time for us to have a snack." The pigman walked back into the living room and placed the 2 plates of mystery meat jerky now next to the 2 frightened animal children. "Meet you next time when we're back." Pablo just continued to shake and cry, not only because of the situation that he and his best friend were in, but because of the fact that his best friend, his soulmate, looked like an empty husk of the kangaroo he once knew. This seemed to anger the pigman, as he slammed his hoof down under the surface of the table with such force that it made the plates on the table jump at least a few inches off of the table. "Sing!" the pig snarled. Pablo looked up at the man and spat in his face. "Fuck you!" Pablo whimpered. The pigman gave Pablo another slap to the face, while Austin gave the man an evil glare. The pigman looked at Austin with a disgusted face before saying, "Don't you dare give me that look again, or I'll go in you dry. You hear me?" Austin reeled back a bit as he gagged and shook with fear. He had already been raped at least 7 times already. He didn't want to push that pig even further. He especially didn't want for Pablo to be used as the fat fuck's sex toy either. Pablo started to weep once more before doing what the man had said. With your friends, the Backyardigans," Pablo said, his voice shaky and cracked. The pigman smiled and looked down at the pair of broken and beaten children in front of him. "Good. Now you 2 eat up. We've got a nice, long, fun couple of months ahead of us." Pablo's eyes widened to the size of spaceships at the mention of how long they were supposedly going to be there. The pigman giggled at the amount of fear that Pablo's eyes showed. Then, there was a massive grumbling sound coming from the pig's stomach. "I'll be right back, you 2, the pigman said as he walked over towards the bathroom door and entered into it, slamming the door shut in the process. Silence. Once again. Pablo looked over at Austin, who honestly looked worse than how he had looked earlier. His body was still covered from head to toe in bruises of various sizes and shapes. Cuts, some very deep, others long gone, were still prevalent on Austin's chest and head, at least the parts of his chest that could be seen from the rips of the fabric in his shirt. His jeans, although not as damaged as his shirt as earlier before, showed a deep branding mark that covered his bottom. Still, it looked rather fresh. Pablo couldn't tell what kind of symbol or mark it was, but the one thing that he did know was that it must have hurt badly. Austin's eyes, however, had told everything. They looked empty, soulless, and almost on the brink of death. Pablo saw this and started to break down crying. Austin noticed this, and almost instantly some form of hope came back to him. He adjusted himself as comfortably as he could, and with his bound hands he embraced Pablo. I'm so sorry, Pablo wept. Austin just rubbed Pablo's back gently and laid the younger penguin's head onto his shoulder to try and comfort his best friend and soulmate as best as he could. Did he hurt you? Pablo asked in between sobs. Yes, Austin said. Did he 7 times, Austin said flatly. It hurt at first, but I got used to it after a while. Still wasn't very pleasant to go through, though. At least I didn't bleed like the first time. I'm sorry, Pablo sobbed. It's not your fault, Pablo, Austin said softly as he continued to rub the penguin's back. I just wish that I had done something to help you guys. Pablo just couldn't say anymore. There's nothing that you could have done, Pablo. You actually did the smart thing by escaping, Austin said. It's not your fault what happened. None of us knew what was gonna happen. I mean, if we did, we wouldn't have gone camping, but don't blame yourself, Pablo. Never blame yourself. Please, don't do it. Just don't, Austin said. Is he gonna kill us? Pablo said, shaking with fear. No, he's not. I made sure of that, Austin said. Pablo looked up at his mate and blinked with confusion. What do you mean? Pablo asked. Austin took a deep breath. After he had dragged me into his room, he started to mess around with me a little bit, but after a while he heard the sound of the door opening. He didn't really bother doing too much, but he decided after a few minutes to go and check. And when he found out that you had escaped, he went livid. He grabbed a gun from his nightstand and was about to go and follow you outside and kill you. At least that's what he told me, but I practically begged him not to hurt you. At first he didn't want to listen, but like he did with you, I wound up catching his interest by making him a deal. What was the deal? Pablo said, concerned. I told him he could use me as much as he wants, provided he not kill you. He kept his promise, although I had to do things that no person should ever have to do in their life, Austin said, shaking violently and lowering his head in shame. Pablo just embraced his best friend and cried into his shoulder. The young penguin honestly couldn't believe that Austin did that for him. I love you, Austin, Pablo said, nuzzling into his best friend. I love you too, Pablo. And I promise we're gonna get out of this. And before you ask, yes, I have a plan. I've had a couple of days to plan it out, but I do have one. Just do what I say, okay? Austin said. Pablo nodded once more. The sound of a toilet flushing blasted quite loudly made the 2 Backyardigans look over to the bathroom door. The pigman opened the door and emerged from the bathroom area. He looked back at the 2 terrified children, and then walked up towards them and pulled out his hunting knife from his back pocket. The 2 looked in fear at the knife that was in the dirty pig's hooved hands. So, I'm in a bit of a naughty mood as of now, he grinned wildly. And since I have 2 of you now, how about we have some fun? No, Pablo said. The pigman stopped and looked at Pablo, a small scowl starting to form on his face. The fuck did you just say to me? The pigman said. I said no, Pablo yelled. The pigman grabbed Pablo by the neck and pulled him towards him in a scowl that would have even made Satan himself cringe with fear. Pablo could smell a hot and decayed breath of the man breathing on his face. However, he stayed firm in his position and his words. Listen to me, you little fucking faggot. You're gonna shut that beak up of yours, and you're gonna let me have some fun now, the pigman said with a heavy snarl. Pablo said nothing, but instead spit into the man's face. the mixture of saliva and blood making contact with his eyes, which caused them to burn horribly. "Fuck you!" As a response, the pigman punched Pablo hard in the face, which would have knocked out some teeth had he had any. Instead, it cracked his beak. The pain from the now inflicted wound caused Pablo to scream out. This caused Austin to almost immediately spring into action. Using the chains that were connected to his wrist, Austin jumped up on the pigman and wrapped the metal chains around his fat, flabby neck of the pigman and held it tightly. The pigman gagged as he began frantically moving around the cabin, slamming himself and Austin into various pieces of furniture, breaking all of it in the process. Pablo got up, wanting to help his friend. However, Austin noticed this and yelled, "Don't get involved, Pablo. Just let me handle this." Pablo slowly sat back down and just watched with a look of anticipation and fear plastered on his face. The sound of the pigman grunting, spitting, and gasping for air scared him greatly, yet at the same time made him feel a little bit hopeful. Austin continued to tighten his grip on the chain, even using his feet to tighten the chain even further to keep the sick fuck from breathing anymore. The pigman tried reaching for Austin. However, he couldn't reach the kangaroo as he was positioned on a part of his back that kept him out of reach, plus his arms were too small and fat to even reach him anyway. Austin knew for a fact that it wasn't going to be long before this bastard choked to death, and he was right. The pigman's face started to turn a deep shade of purple and blue. His movement came to a sudden halt, and his gasp for air became weaker and weaker. Austin let out one final yell and yanked the chain as tightly as he could before the man dropped to the floor, twitching a few times, and then going still. Austin held the chains on the neck of the man for a few moments more before slowly removing them. Upon doing that, Austin fell on his rump and just stared at the limp body of the pigman. He took a few deep breaths and then got up from where he was sitting at. He turned towards Pablo and said, "Okay, you can get up now. He's dead." Pablo slowly got up and made his way towards Austin, which was honestly difficult due to the chains attached to his flippers. "You okay?" Pablo asked, concerned. "Sorta. I'm just glad that monster's dead," Austin said, looking over the limp body of the filthy predator that laid before him. Austin then started looking into the man's pockets and pulled out a set of keys, which he used to unlock the chains that were clasped on their hands and flippers, and even the large metal collar that was on around Austin's neck. Upon getting themselves free, Austin grabbed Pablo by the flipper and led him into the kitchen area. "Pablo, I need you to go and look for a phone somewhere," Austin ordered. "Are you sure that there's even one here?" Pablo began. "We're out in the middle of the forest. I doubt there'd be any signal even if we could find a phone." "You just let me deal with that, Pablo. Now go and look. I'll look in the room for anything that we might need," Austin said. Pablo immediately began looking around the kitchen area for a phone of some sort. It wasn't long until he wound up finding his cell phone in one of the drawers. Pablo immediately held down the on button, praying that it would hopefully still have any charge left to it. To his delight, the phone turned on, and it showed that the battery still had full charge. Not only that, but it also had, shockingly enough, a few bars that meant that they had signal. Then he remembered that he had actually turned the phone off when they had left the house, which was the reason why they still had battery. Although he still wasn't 100% sure how in the world they had signal. Austin immediately handed the phone to Pablo. "Here you go, Pablo. Go on ahead and give the police a call," Austin said. "Sure thing, Austin. In fact, I know a detective who most likely is looking for us," Pablo said. "Who?" Austin asked. "You'll see." The young penguin quickly dialed Detective Maria's phone number. She had given it to him before he had left the police station, and he had memorized it by heart. The young detective spotted the cabin about a few hundred or so feet away from her and the other cops, which prompted her and the other cops to continue running in that direction. She then felt a slight vibration coming from her pocket, to which she stopped in her tracks and grabbed her phone out to check who was calling. "Hello?" Maria asked.
Detective Maria, it's me, Pablo.
"Pablo, oh my god. Are you alright?"
I'm fine. Austin is with me too.
He's alive? Maria asked.
Yeah, he is. Thank God.
Okay, Pablo. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to stay on the phone with me until we get there, okay? We've already located where you two are. One more question. Where's Alex?
Who's Alex?
Alex is the pigman who kidnapped you and your friends. Where is he?
He's dead.
How did he die?
Austin choked him to death with some chains.
There was a small pause before Maria asked, Are either of you two seriously injured in any way?
No, as far as I know. I mean, I have a cracked beak, if that counts.
Okay, Pablo. We'll get an ambulance down here ASAP.
Thank you.
Pablo immediately put the phone down on the counter and turned on the speaker so that Maria's voice could be heard by the other two. However, as Pablo was walking around the place talking with Maria, he noticed the pigman rush forward towards Austin at full force. "Austin, look out!" Pablo screamed. However, there really wasn't any time for Austin to react, as he felt a large hand grabbing him and throwing him across the room. Austin smashed into a mirror and fell to the ground, knocking a small side table drawer down next to him. Pablo looked up in horror, only to see the pigman grabbing the phone from the counter and crushing it in his fist. The pigman then grabbed Pablo and pinned him to the ground, his fat, greasy hands wrapping themselves onto Pablo's neck. Pablo choked and gagged as he struggled to breathe.
"You little fucking bitch! I should have killed you right on the spot!"
The pigman spat and screamed as he tightened his grip around Pablo's neck. Had not Pablo's face already been the color blue, his lack of oxygen would have made up for that. Austin slowly awoken from his unconscious state that he had already been in. He was covered in glass and cuts. He groaned slightly before seeing the pigman choke Pablo out. He quickly looked at the now toppled-over drawer in front of him, and his eyes widened.
"I swear to God, I'm gonna cut your eyes in open. I'm gonna have your friend skull fuck you in the next week. I swear, you little fucking faggot, I will do that to you."
The pigman's eyes widened as the grip on Pablo's neck loosened, causing the penguin to gasp for air as he fell down to the ground with a soft thud. Breathing heavily, Pablo looked up at the man, as the man took a few steps back and fell to the ground with a heavy thud. No twitching, no moving, nothing. Pablo looked up to see Austin holding a small pistol in his hands, aimed right at the man, with smoke still coming out of the barrel. He was breathing heavily as well. Austin then dropped the gun to the ground, fell to his knees, and began sobbing like a baby. Pablo's eyes turned from his mate down to where the blood had hit the man. A small stream of blood poured down the little hole that was right smack dab in the lower part of the man's spine. Pablo immediately ran up to his friend and held him tight, not letting him go for even a second, and soon he started crying alongside the kangaroo as well. Less than 30 seconds after that whole incident, a loud and heavy bang sent the front door crashing to the ground. It was the police. The police, the FBI, and even the SWAT team all barged into the house, guns drawn, Detective Murillo being the last one to enter into the home. Everyone immediately stopped dead in their tracks as they saw the body of the pigman lying on the ground, and the two sobbing animal children, not even noticing the police officers surrounding them. "Oh my God," Maria said as she ran up towards the two. She embraced the two of them in her arms and held them tight, even shedding a few tears herself. But it was all over now. No more pain, no more pigmen, nothing. Maria carefully took them out of the cabin, calming them down with her sweet tone of voice. She then took them to one of the ambulances, and the three of them were taken to the hospital, far, far away from that nightmare. The pigman was taken to another hospital. As it turned out, the bullet that struck him hadn't killed him. It did, however, paralyze him from the waist down, although that wasn't the only thing that he was going to have to deal with. He was going to suffer so much worse.